The history of the Bahá'í Faith in Kenya. It began quietly, like the first drops of rain on dry African soil, gentle, unnoticed at first, but destined to awaken a spiritual garden. The Bahá'í Faith arrived in Kenya in the early 1950s, carried not by armies or empires, but by humble souls with hearts full of light and a message that all humanity is one. Among the earliest of these was Eustace White, a Jamaican Baha'i who traveled through East Africa sharing the teachings of Baha'u'llah. Soon after, a woman named William Mutal Masetlha, a towering figure in African Baha'i history from Zambia, helped support the early communities taking root in Kenya. But the real heartbeat of the faith in Kenya was the ordinary Kenyan men and women who embraced it with joy, prayer, and action. Picture Mzee Omadi, a quiet farmer from Kisumu, who heard the message of the Baha'i faith under a mango tree and declared his belief the very next morning. Or Mama Achieng, a retired school teacher in Kakamega, who began teaching neighborhood children about unity and prayer long before the idea of children's classes became formalized. These were not grand scholars, they were everyday Kenyans, moved by the truth that every soul is noble and every person has a divine purpose. In 1952, the first local spiritual assembly in Kenya was formed in Nairobi. It was a simple, structure 9 elected members, chosen not for wealth or position, but for spiritual qualities and a heart to serve. They consulted under trees, met in homes, and walked long distances to support isolated believers in far-flung villages. The early communities were racially diverse Black Kenyans, Asian settlers, and European pioneers gathering as one family at a time when the country itself was deeply divided along racial and colonial lines. As the winds of independence began to blow across Kenya in the 1960s, the Baha'i community was already practicing what the nation dreamed of oneness. They held conventions in Kisii, Eldoret, and Nairobi, where tribal elders, young women, city clerks, and subsistence farmers all prayed together, consulted together, and planned ways to teach unity and serve their communities. No one sat higher than another. In the Baha'i faith, leadership is shared, and service is honor. One of the most powerful themes that emerged was empowerment through spiritual service. In Meru, young Baha'is created literacy classes for children. In Kiambu, farmers gathered not just to read scripture, but to plan tree planting and peace gatherings. The teachings of Baha'u'llah were not just read, they were lived, and always at the center of their gatherings was prayer in Swahili, Kikuyu, Luo, Luhya, Kalenjin, and English, each voice adding to the choir of praise. The 1970s and 80s saw Baha'i communities spreading across the country. In remote areas like Marsabit and Turkana, believers would gather under acacia trees, sharing stories of the Bab and Baha'u'llah alongside fire-cooked meals. Baha'i conferences were often as much about song and dance as they were about consultation, because the African spirit knows that joy is part of worship. The dream of a Bahá'í House of Worship in Kenya, Mashrikal Adkar, was spoken of in hushed hope for decades. And finally, in 2021, this dream blossomed in Matunda-Soy, near Eldoret, a radiant dome rising from the green western highlands, surrounded by fields of maize and homes filled with prayer. It is not just a building, it is a temple of light for all people, from all walks of life. It stands as a symbol that spiritual awakening can take root in African soil and bloom magnificently. The Baha'i faith in Kenya today is vibrant and growing. It thrives in bustling cities and quiet villages, in university halls and market stalls. The community builds not just temples of stone, but temples of character. Through children's classes, junior youth programs, devotional gatherings, and service projects, Kenyans continue to live the Baha'i ideals: justice, consultation, love, and unity. From the shores of Lake Victoria to the foothills of Mount Kenya, from the streets of Nairobi to the farms of Bungoma, the faith continues its steady rise, not with force, but with invitation, not with noise, but with light. And so, the story of the Baha'i faith in Kenya is not only one of history, it is a story still being written. A story where each person is a character, each home a center of transformation, each heart a candle lit with purpose.